Have you guys heard of the movie Chariots of Fire? I'm sure you probably have, because even though the movie's older than you guys, it's a very popular one in Christian culture. That's because the main character, who is the swift-footed racer Eric Liddell, he refuses to race in the 1924 Olympics in his best race because that race is on Sunday, and he wants to respect the Sabbath on that day. He also ends up becoming a missionary to China, finishing off his life well there. So he is a great model of faithfulness to God. And people love the movie for that reason, and his biographies as well. There's a scene, though, in the movie, which did really happen in his life, that most people skip over, but I think is really helpful for us. So it's this race, the 440-yard dash, that Eric is in with 3 other competitors. And Eric starts out the race so well. He's ahead of all of them. But then one of them bumps him, probably on purpose, and knocks him down. And then there's this man on the side who's holding a stopwatch, and he says, "Get up, lad, get up." And Eric Liddell gets up and he starts running. But they're about at least 20 yards ahead of him. And he begins to close the gap. He gets closer and closer. And as he passes 2 of the competitors and is catching up to the guy who knocked him over, he does, in his typical fashion, in the way he raced, he whips his head back with his mouth wide open and runs, looking like a combination of a Muppet and Woody from Toy Story as he runs. But he finishes the race and wins, even though he was knocked down early on and out of the race early on. I think that story, sorry about that, almost dropping the phone there. I think that story is a great metaphor or allegory for Israel's life. We're moving our way through the story of Joseph, Jacob, Judah, and Jesus. But only so far, we've only had a little bit about Israel and a lot about the other characters. We've seen how he was idolizing Rachel and then the sons of Rachel, and how God transformed him through the claws of providence. But we haven't got much about him as a character. In Genesis chapters 47 to 49, we're going to see a lot more about him. Most of those chapters are mostly about him. There is a section at the end of chapter 47 that's about the consolidation of wealth under Joseph to Pharaoh of Egypt. But really, even that is about Israel. Go read chapter 47 after you're done here. And what you'll see is that actually is there to contrast the decline of Egypt with the prosperity of Israel. God being faithful to his promises to Israel to make his people prosper, even in Egypt. And you know, in hard times, God is always caring for his people. He's always caring for his church, even though the rest of the world is suffering. Remember that even right now, the church is prospering in many ways during this pandemic. But anyway, these chapters are about the end of Israel's life. And the race that I just talked about by Eric Liddell, I think is a good allegory for his life. Israel started out well in Genesis 32, when he wrestled with God and said to God, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." But then he began to stumble and fall. He first idolized Rachel and then her sons, and that idolatry took over his life. Yet God worked on him, stripping away his dragon skin of idolatry through providence, like we talked about in episodes 19 and 20. Now Israel is back in the race again and finishing faithfully like Eric Liddell. And we'll get to see that in these next few chapters as he is at the ages of 130 and then 147. And he finishes the last 50 yards, so to speak, faithfully. And you know, these chapters may not seem very applicable to you guys because you guys are young pups compared to Israel. But I think you'll find that they are. The thing I want you to pay attention to and focus on today is that the value the Bible places on old age and how different that is from how our culture views age. Our culture values youth in everything. You can see it in advertisements, TV shows, magazines, etc., everywhere. And it makes it seem like you guys are the most important demographic in the world and the elderly don't really matter anymore. Or as Shakespeare put it in All the World's a Stage, it's a, quote, second childishness and mere oblivion, sans, that is without, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans hearing, sans taste, sans everything. Well, Shakespeare and our culture are wrong. They're dead wrong. And don't listen to them. Listen to what the psalmist tells us in Psalm 92. The righteous flourish like a palm tree. They grow like a cedar in Lebanon. They are planted in the house of the Lord. They flourish in the courts of our God. They still bear fruit in old age. They are full of sap and green, to declare that the Lord is upright. He is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him. I know when you're a teenager, it seems like your parents are irrelevant and they don't know anything, and it's even worse for your grandparents. But let me ask you, would you rather be sitting under this tree right back over here, or that little sapling over there in the memorial garden? I don't know if you can see it from here, but it's so small you might not be able to, but that's the point. I think you'd rather be sitting under that, full of sap and green. Well, it will be green once spring fills out, as the psalmist put it. God's word would have you sit under the wisdom, the fruit of the wisdom of age, under your parents and under your grandparents, not under your peers or any pop culture icon. And we'll look more at that as we get through, as we see more of Israel's life in these next 3 chapters. So you think about that, and I'll see you again tomorrow.